On today's show, pedals power this wordsmith. Find out why Ben Weaver rides up to 100 miles a day to do his job. One Minnesota River adventure comes with the ups and downs of whitewater rafting. And people continue to buzz over beekeeping. We help you get started.
Minnesota Bound, presented by Connecticut Water Treatment Systems.
Hey everybody, welcome to Minnesota Bound.
Up first, a story about a guy who likes to ride bikes.
Ben Weaver rides up to 100 miles a day on his bike.
The thing is, his passion leads him to work.
Pedaling can be a powerful thing. On a summer day, Ben Weaver rolls south.
The bike is one of the few places where I can just be with my thoughts, and sometimes I don't even need to know what those thoughts are. I just need to let them kind of flow through me, I guess.
Here in the country, Ben's bike provides the rhythm. Pedaling powers the tempo.
You know, when you're on a bike and you're on a road, you're on the edge. And like I've always been in that space. And I'm on the edge of this like paved, you know, industrialized thing. And I'm right next to the weeds in the ditch.
See, Ben rides his bike 93 miles to work.
So next stop?
Winona. I think it's about 25 miles or something.
A day ride from St. Paul to Winona for this self-described athlete and artist.
Those things have always been like really strong forces in my life, and I just chose to let them coexist.
The bike explains sport. The artist thing, well, take a closer look at its ride.
I always rode my bike, so I just decided, what if I just start riding to my shows? And it just kind of evolved from there. You know, sometimes I end up riding a lot of pavement, but the kind of goal and where I love to be is to find ways to connect communities through dirt. And that's why a lot of my shows I end up playing in small rural communities that don't necessarily have music.
Performer tonight, Ben Weaver is a songwriter and poet who travels by bicycle. He uses his music as a tool to strengthen relationships between people and their local ecosystems. Without any further ado, Ben Weaver.
Thanks. Twisting and turning every road you go down. Late in the evening, like bees moving pollen around.
So Ben's music and his poetry really looks at our natural environment, our ecosystem, and really tries to make connections between people and their environment.
And I talked to the wolf, but I was not surprised when the wolf talked back to me.
So there's a great fit between what Ben does and his music and his poetry, and we do with visual art here at the Minnesota Marine Art Museum.
Don't lose the roots for the sake of the branch. Don't let the river slip out through the cracks. You know, we live in incredibly disconnected and challenging times. My hope is that the words offer a chance to reconnect. Like blackbirds sitting on the back porch.
Words about water and woods and prairies. Songs that connect people to the places they live. And yes, he always tries to ride to his shows.
The first really long trip I did, I rode from St. Paul, where I live, to New Orleans.
In 2018, Ben actually rode North America's Great Divide Bike Trail, a 3,000-mile trek from Banff, Canada to the Mexico border. He played 16 shows along the way, while a filmmaker documented the trip.
I'm not special, I just was inspired and made a choice to follow through with that inspiration.
His fans seemed to get it.
I liked his music. I enjoyed it.
And I couldn't believe it. He biked from Canada way down the backbone of the Rockies. I liked the music, I liked the message, and it's inspiring that he wrote everything himself, the songs and the poetry.
A Minnesota man who chose his own road to success, a wordsmith who refuses to just sit still.
If you don't want to be sitting in an office all day, like, you don't have to. You can figure something out. I feel like my songs and my path speaks to that.
We're closer, I always want to be.
Minnesota Bound is brought to you by Connecticut, Coors Light, Star Bank, and by Alumacraft Boats.
Up next, a sport that takes a strong heart and some powerful hands, as Minnesotans jump in the boat to tackle whitewater.
The river we play on is called the St. Louis River. We're about 15 minutes southeast of Duluth, Minnesota. When I get here in the morning, I pull up, I make sure that everything's still here. Generally, when I come here, though, to be quite honest, my wife has already opened everything up. I'm just showing up and hopefully jumping in a boat. She spoils me that way.
It was my husband's idea to purchase this business.
One day out of the blue, I just bought a rafting company. No, Blue Bong, our director of operations, convinced me to go in on this thing. Normally, we're not scrambling to do this, but both Blue and I and Steph all have full-time plus jobs, so.
Your slip is a ticket to your trip. That's saying, I'm ready, I'm good to go. You're gonna hand that ticket to one of my young guides, who's then gonna trade you and give you a vest.
So lean forward, put the paddle in, and sit up.
He loves it. He would live on the river if I let him.
Chris would love to get rid of his day job and do this 24/7. If we could do this year-round, we'd both be out here all year.
We all have full-time jobs. This is more of a vocation and a dream and something that we can do to share with other people.
We're going with Chris. Chris is fun. He grew up in Duluth. Him and his wife both did, and they weren't aware of this. They literally go out west and go rafting. And when I brought it up to him, hey, the raft company I used to work for is for sale. They're like, rafting in Minnesota? What? You know, they're even were like that.
And so when we discovered, I'm like, everybody needs to know about this.
In this stretch, it progressively goes from class 1s to class 2s to class 3, 4s. The series of 6 rapids.
The wave is the first one. So as you're going through the wave, we punch through it the first time, and then we come back around, and we do what's called an eddy out. We turn into the flat water, we paddle back up, and we actually try surfing it. Push your bow into the backside of the other wave, and you basically get a lap full of water, and everybody starts yahooing, and they get used to paddling hard, they get used to the water temp.
And then it goes to boat smear, and then it goes into a canyon where we have a break, and then we hit hidden holes, and they all progressively get bigger and bigger and funner. And then we go over the big drop. It's a 6 to 8 foot drop that the river runs over. It creates this really neat ramp.
And then it drops into a drop, and you got this nice wall of water you're gonna hit.
Certainly when people turn around and look back upstream, they always see that as the, wow, I just went down that rapids. I'm looking for the opportunity to teach something to the people in front of me and share that enjoyment of the river and that enjoyment of this activity that is, you know, not really all that accessible to a lot of people. I'd do this for a living if I could make a living at it. I'm working on it.
That looks like fun. We are so lucky to have so many outdoor adventures to be had here in Minnesota. Follow our Instagram page for more outdoor adventures.
Still ahead, the business of beekeeping. And later, we go back in time on a remote Lake Superior island.
Closed captioning is brought to you by the Minnesota Bound Podcast on the Talk North Podcast Network.
Honeybees are all abuzz these days. Have you ever been curious about getting started beekeeping? Well, I'm here at the Bee's Knees in Minneapolis to show you how to get started. Hi, Christy.
Hey, Laura, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, welcome.
Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah.
So I am so excited to be in the Bee's Knees because not only do I love to eat honey, but I also understand the growing popularity and curiosity in beekeeping. You know, what is it about beekeeping that interests people?
You know, I started this business 8 years ago, and back then a lot of it was the bees are in trouble and people were curious why they were in trouble, and also beekeeping started to be more accessible in urban areas, and I think the growing movement of having a connection to your food and where it comes from helps with that.
Is it difficult to get started?
So I think the hardest part of getting started is just getting over your own fear of the bee. If you show people how to work around bees, then there's an understanding that, oh, if I do this a certain way, I won't get stung as much.
As much is the key word
there. I want to be honest with you, it happens.
Okay, Christy, speaking of stings, I'm guessing this is probably one of the very first things you want if you're going to get started beekeeping.
So you need your protective gear. So bees sting, but they die when they sting, so they don't do it lightly. But the face is really the worst place to get stung. Very sensitive items on your face. Yeah. Nose, eyes, mouth. So the other thing you need is a smoker. We use a smoker to calm the bees down, but mostly to cover up their scent. So bees communicate by pheromones, by smell, and they have an alarm pheromone that to us smells like bananas. So if you put a little smoke on them before you enter the hive, and while you're working them, they can't communicate to each other and say there's an intruder, and you'll avoid getting stung. Another thing is what's called a hive tool. This is like, if you're a carpenter, you use your hammer for everything. Beekeeper uses a hive tool, mostly to get in and out of the hive. We use this tool to pry open boxes, but also move the frames around. This is called a frame, and these frames, there's 10 of them in a box.
And where do you actually get the bees from? Do you have to source them from a bee farmer or someone like yourself?
There are a couple different suppliers where you can buy bees. We recommend trying to find someone local that is raising bees in their area so that they're adapted to our climate.
So now we're standing in the nectar patch, which means, are we about to harvest some honey?
We are. In order to harvest the honey, there's a couple of ways you can do it. The most common is you take a hot knife, or you could take a serrated bread knife. You just take this knife and gently go up the comb, and opens up the hexagon that is holding all
Look at that.
So then we take this frame and we put it in a honey extractor. It's basically a centrifuge. Our version of it is pedal powered. All right, so you're probably good on that round.
You know what's amazing is the amount of honey. It's a sticky business, but the sweet reward is well worth it. Thanks for showing us how to get started. It was
You're
fun.
welcome. Thanks for coming.
Coming up next, go back in time to experience life on Isle Royale.
Minnesota Bound is brought to you by Bent Creek Golf Club, Eden Prairie, and by Totem Resorts, the premier destination for world-class fishing.
Today's Minnesota Bound Classic takes Ron Shera up to Lake Superior.
Out to the lake's most storied island, a place people still covet, at least for those who like to get out of life's fast lane.
It's the largest island in the world's largest body of fresh water. Isle Royale, it's called, a work of nature dating back 11,000 years. And oddly, it's an island larger today than a few thousand years ago. Call it a quirk of geology. Isle Royale long has been an oasis of mystery and intrigue, its surrounding waters rich with fish, its rocky outcrops harboring potential riches such as copper. Or so we thought.
People have been coming out here for fish for thousands of years. The same with the land. The mining of the copper has been an incredible use on the island. But now, as you go around and you look at the island, you can't really tell. The impact has really been covered up over the centuries. Nature really does do a good job of recovering.
Nature recovered, but those who sought their hopes and dreams here often didn't fare as well. Yet the Isle Royale mystique has been as endless as the waves of Gitche Gumee that pound its rocky shores. For nearly 70 years now, the island has been under the care of the nation's National Park Service. Visitors today come to hike the island's many trails, to camp on its scenic vistas, and explore a natural world largely isolated from Minnesota's North Shore by 20 miles of cold water.
I just love it. The isolation of the island, the wilderness atmosphere. It's just a nice place to walk and canoe, and I just love it.
Even the waters around Isle Royale hold mystery, as more than one ship has met its match on the island's rocks.
People that enjoy shipwreck and shipwreck diving, you can swim through the wrecks. There's a lot of rooms that you can see. But I think it's people that enjoy not just the shipwrecks, they enjoy the whole experience.
Yet the island has become more than a park. It's a giant living laboratory that tests the ever-changing balance of nature. The main players in this drama are wolves and moose, whose fortunes go up and down in an endless play about the relationships of predators and prey. That's our Isle Royale story, a story that took 11,000 years to tell.
It's crazy to think that that's not even part of us, that island is part of the state of Michigan.
Well, if you'd like more information on the island, this week's podcast is dedicated to life out there.
I talked to a long-timer whose family has had a place on Isle Royale for decades. It's the Minnesota Bound podcast this week. the stories behind the stories.
Well, that about does it for us today. We'll see you back here next week.
In the meantime, don't forget to introduce a kid to the great outdoors.
Transportation provided by Premier Transportation. Call 1-800-899-7433.